Hey guys, I've been making this video for about 2 days now. My intentions for the video were to make a custom windshield for my side-by-side. I needed a custom windshield because I have an aftermarket cage and the OEM windshields won't fit my YXZ anymore. The aftermarket cage has a little bit different shape. Also, I have tabs welded on for my light bar, and this one has an intrusion bar that sticks down a lot lower than the bends on most aftermarket windshields. So I needed to make my own custom windshield, and I don't really like riding with a windshield on, so I wanted to make one just for a ride that's coming up next weekend. It's supposed to be about 10 degrees, and I really didn't want to freeze and be miserable, and I thought this was a good chance to make a video, but I kind of went cheap, and I really shouldn't have. And I was debating not even posting this video because it's such a failure, but I really wanted you guys to know what I did and what mistakes I made, and I wanted you guys not to make these mistakes because it cost me about $200, which is really unfortunate. So when I started planning building my custom windshield, I did a lot of research, and I found that most people that were going with like a plexiglass style windshield went with polycarbonate or Lexan. Polycarbonate is about 250 times stronger than glass and really scratch resistant. It's really good stuff, but it's so expensive. For a sheet of it, a 1/4 inch thick, is triple the price that any aftermarket windshield is going for. And I'm only going to use this windshield for a couple rides in the winter, so I didn't want to go that route. And I researched a little more, and I've seen a lot of guys that said you can get away with using an acrylic windshield, which I was hesitant anyway because I knew acrylic was pretty brittle and prone to cracking. But I did some more research, and I found that Menards had a commercial style acrylic sheet. They even had a picture of a UTV on the little sale placard, and it said for utility vehicles. So I ended up picking that sheet up. I figure it'd work good enough. It was 36 inches by 72 inches and just under a 1/4 inch thick, and it looked really awesome. But I got the windshield cut out, and I wanted to bend towards the bottom. I heated it up and bent the bottom of the windshield. It bent just fine. It looked really good. I got the whole thing sanded up, looking really nice. And then all of a sudden I was just standing next to it, and the thing just exploded and cracked in pieces. I don't know if it was the tension from heating it and bending it, or it did crack on one of the slots that I cut for one of my mirror mounts. But I just wanted you to know, I would definitely not use acrylic of any sort for a side-by-side windshield. I feel like it's either going to crack when you're making it or on the trail, which is probably worst case. And I mean, this thing, it busted apart, cut my leg. It just it was just a failure altogether. I did record the entire process of me making the windshield. I even test fit it up. It looked really good, and I was really happy with it, but then it just snapped, and I was heartbroken, honestly. But I am going to show you how I made the windshield, because there are a lot of good tips and pointers in it for making a custom windshield, but I just used the wrong material, hands down. I knew it was gonna be a mistake, and I went cheap, and I shouldn't have. So you can use some of these tips to make a custom windshield, but definitely use polycarbonate if you're gonna invest the money. It's just gonna save you a load of time. Don't use acrylic. To lay out the shape of the windshield, I ended up grabbing a couple Crayola trifold poster boards from Meyer. They were like $5 a piece. I had to take a piece off of one of the poster boards and tape it onto the other poster board, so I had the right width to go across my cage. Once I had them taped together, I placed the poster board on the front of my cage, right on where the windshield would go. I did have to cut a slit because I have light bar tabs here. I slid the poster board up and put it in place, and then I just kind of traced around the edge of my cage The lines were a little bit wobbly, so I did use a straight edge to clean them up before I cut out the pattern. I also marked the bottom of my intrusion bar because I kind of wanted to make a fold or a bend in the plexiglass to kind of cover up down here to block some of the wind that comes through. To lay out the bottom of the windshield near the fender kind of dashboard area here, I ended up taking a Sharpie marker and just taping a pen very close to the tip, and then just kind of using the pen to kind of follow the contour of the fenders. I'll show you a video right now of me kind of tracing that. Here's the windshield template that I made. You can see that it follows the lines of the cage. I just traced the cage and then cleaned up the lines and then cut it with some scissors. You can see there's a slit here that goes around my light bar mount. This mount is welded to the cage. I thought about cutting a hole in the template so this part wasn't just kind of flopping around, but that means I would have to take my light bar off every time I would put the windshield on. And like I said, I don't like riding with a windshield all that much, so I would have the windshield on and off quite frequently, so I didn't want to do that, so I just slid it. To hold this cardboard to the frame while I traced it, I zip tied it to the cage. So I did kind of cut around my aftermarket mirrors here, because I'm going to have these mirrors on all the time. I love them, so they're going to be staying on the machine, so I felt comfortable cutting out around the mirrors. When I was doing this part of the template here, where the bend is going to go in the windshield, I just kind of marked the center of the cage and made one side of the template. I traced it like I showed in one of the previous videos, and then I took this piece of template and mirrored it over to the other side, and then it worked out pretty well. You can see that there is quite a bit of space in between where the windshield's gonna be and the plastic, but I really do not want to scratch up my paint or scratch up my cage. I don't mind if a little bit of wind gets through or some snow gets through. I just want the windshield to block a majority of the wind coming through, but I really don't want to scratch any of my paint. To make sure that the windshield doesn't scratch up my cage, I bought this adhesive foam padding. It's 2 inches wide and an 1/8 inch thick, and it has a nice adhesive, and it's black on the back side, so you shouldn't be able to notice it too much through the windshield. I didn't want to stick it to my cage, so I'm going to stick it on the windshield. It might not look as great, but I would rather mess up the windshield than the cage. I'm going to be using this type of clamp to mount my custom windshield to my frame. The Crash Off-Road cage is made up of 3 different sizes of tubing, so I had to get 3 different sizes of clamps. I got 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, and 1 3/4 inches. Each of these cost about $12 a piece, between $10 and $12. So these are fairly cheap. They're made of stainless steel and they have a nice rubber coating on them. So hopefully these work out good. For fasteners, I just ran to Tractor Supply Company and grabbed some standard 1/4 inch bolts, 1 inch long, and then the nuts, washers, and lock washers to go along with them. I was gonna do all stainless, but I'm not gonna use this windshield all that much, so I didn't want to go all out. That was gonna be quite a bit more money, so I figured just standard bolts are fine. I didn't even need to go grade 8 because there's not that much stress on these bolts. Now I'm gonna start tracing my template onto the acrylic sheet. Since I'm gonna bend the bottom portion of this windshield, I'm not gonna cut any of this bottom detail around the fenders out yet. I'm gonna just cut a line straight down. That way I have some more material to grab onto to bend the windshield. And I am gonna have to heat this plexiglass up. So I'm gonna have to take this film off, and then I'll probably have to lay the template back on and then draw my lines again and then cut it once it's bent. Before I actually start cutting the windshield out, there are a couple areas that I'm gonna just drill a hole to make cutting much easier. So I'm gonna start in these mirror pockets here. Just kind of go in the corner. All right, now I'm gonna start cutting. I got the edges of the windshield all cleaned up now. There were big chunks of melted plastic that I got off with my Dremel tool, and then I kind of went around the edges with a flat file, and just kind of smoothed out all the edges, got all the sharp corners off. And then I did reshape these mirror pockets, kind of make them both the same size, just kind of make all the edges parallel and round the corners. But for the inside, I did use a round file and kind of clean them up on the inside. I also cleaned up the inside of the slot with the round file. So it looks pretty good. The edges look kind of rough because of the plastic that's kind of peeling up, but it's really smooth now. It's not like laser cut, but it's pretty good. Before I start bending the windshield, I'm going to use this T-bevel just to kind of get the angle of bend that I want. Since I have to use a heat gun to heat up the bottom of this acrylic sheet, I'm going to pull up a little bit of this protective layer here. I'm going to have to redraw these lines on, but that's fine. I'm just going to move it up about that much. Do the same thing to the other side. I laid my windshield template back on top of this acrylic sheet, and I have some pieces of painter's tape here where I'm going to mark where the bend needs to start. I'm going to use this wider board to put underneath my windshield for bending. I'm going to screw down this board to my sawhorses. These sawhorses aren't really much good anymore. They're kind of on their last leg, or what's left of their legs, so I'm not really worried about them. All right, I set my windshield up here on top of that wide board that we just screwed down. I lined these tape marks up with the edge of the board. Now I'm gonna put a 2x4 on top, line those edges up. Clamp it down. Do the same thing on the other side. Now it's time to heat and bend the bottom portion of this acrylic windshield. I'm going to use this cheap $8 Harbor Freight heat gun. I did some test pieces and it worked out pretty well. I am going to kind of check with the T-bevel just how much we're going to need to bend it down. Looks like quite a bit. But I'm going to have the T-bevel handy so I can check it once it's bent. I'm going to run the heat gun on the underside of the windshield and heat it up pretty well. I'm going to make sure I stay off of the windshield and not touch it so it doesn't melt it. So I'm just going to heat it up pretty good. And then I'm going to come to the top side and warm it up even further. And then get it kind of warm and malleable. Once I can feel it start to want to bend, then I'm going to grab this plastic trim piece here. And then I'll just push down and try to kind of squeeze it and apply pressure evenly, and then bend it down to about where I think it needs to go, and then I'll check it with my T-bevel. fine. It acts like the middle needs bent in a little more. There. Let me see what I got for an angle here. Now that I have the bottom of the windshield all bent, I need to remark the bottom so I can cut out the profile of the fenders and dashboard. So I'm gonna lay the template back up here. I was gonna use a Sharpie on the plexiglass, but since I took that protective film off, I tried a test piece with some Sharpie and tried to wipe it off and use alcohol to get it off. So the Sharpie is really difficult to get off. So what I'm gonna do is put painter's tape underneath this so I can mark the painter's tape and then just peel it off when I'm done. Now I'm gonna cut the fender and dashboard pieces out. I did unroll some of this protective coating and put it around the wood so it doesn't scratch up the windshield. I also had some of these furniture moving pads sitting around, so I'm gonna use those to clamp the windshield down for cutting. I got the edges filed down pretty well. I'm trying to get some of this dust off, but it's everywhere. I have the windshield on for a test fitting. It looks pretty good. I do have to do some trimming, but I did make one mistake that you guys might have noticed earlier in the video when I was bending this. I actually bent this the wrong direction. So now my passenger side is on my driver's side and my driver's side's on my passenger side. But luckily the windshield's symmetrical, so it didn't make any difference. My clamps still line up, everything's still fine. But I am gonna have to do some trimming. It's not quite touching the cage right now. It's being held up by this frame right here, and it's pretty close on the fender and the frame right here. I have quite a bit of space everywhere else, and I really don't want it to scratch, so I'm gonna trim a little more off of here, do the same on the other side, and I think it should sit right in there. But it's looking pretty good. I left a gap at the top so it doesn't rub my frame. Yeah, I can't wait to see it done. I put some more painter's tape on the edges that need trimming, so I'm gonna mark those up now. I'm gonna cut quite a bit off because I really don't want it to scratch. Well, this video just took a turn. I guess now I can call it why not to use acrylic for a side-by-side windshield. It's just really brittle. I was just kind of cutting this off, and then all of a sudden this just kind of exploded. You can see it just, I mean, it's just snapping. Yep. Looks like I'm gonna have to go another route for a windshield here. Either that or I'm gonna be real cold on my ride. It's very unfortunate. I spent 2 days making this thing. Yep. I guess I'll update you on what I figure out. So yeah, there was the big crack. I was just so sick of looking at this windshield and so disgusted by it. I just let it sit overnight and it just continued to crack. This piece fell right off. Even today, I went out and moved the windshield around and this corner snapped off. Acrylic is just way too brittle to make a windshield out of, in my opinion. I would definitely go with polycarbonate or try to make an aftermarket windshield work. It's just, I wasted a lot of money there. To fix this issue and get a windshield by the ride coming up this weekend, what I ended up doing was I ordered a Super ATV aftermarket windshield for a 2019 YXZ, and I'm definitely going to have to make some modifications to it. My cage is like a few inches shorter than a stock cage, so I might have to take a couple inches off the top of the windshield. Since my light bar brackets are welded on, I'm going to have to slot the windshield for the light bar brackets and for the mirrors. But I think I can make it work. I'm not too worried about cutting this windshield because it's polycarbonate and it cuts a lot easier and it's a lot stronger. So if that works out, you might see another windshield video coming up. But I have over $550 wrapped up in this video and windshields in general. It's a bummer for sure. But speaking of that, if you could, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel. You don't get paid from YouTube unless you're over 1,000 subscribers, and I desperately want to hit that eventually. So some of these mistakes aren't quite as painful, so we could get monetized a little bit even. But yeah, don't buy acrylic, get polycarbonate if you're making your own custom windshield. See you next time.